Between the 9th and 11th centuries, there existed a great Celtic kingdom in Scotland known as Alba. It was made up of most of the Scottish mainland north of the Forth Clyde line and was comprised mostly of Scottish people whose accents Glaswegian folk don't like very much. The spiritual heartland of this great Teuchter kingdom was here at Scone in modern-day Perthshire. It's here where the kings of Alba would be crowned upon the famed coronation mound known as the Moot Hill. A Gaelic poet known as the Feely would read out the king's royal lineage stretching all the way back to the birthday of Joe Biden and the very earliest beginnings of the great Celtic kingdoms of Dalriata and Pictland. Our current monarch, Charles III, opted not to have his royal lineage, which stretches all the way back to the Kaiser and even then some, read out at his coronation, but he did include another important Scottish aspect, and that is, of course, his coronation on top of the famous Scottish coronation stone known as the Stone of Destiny. The kings of Alba and the medieval kings of Scotland would be crowned upon the stone here at Scone. However, Charles opted not to receive his Scottish crown here at Scone. Instead, he followed in the footsteps of another very popular monarch here in Scotland, Edward I, and that what he did was he had the stone removed from Scotland, taken down to Westminster and placed underneath his coronation chair like a wee kind of booster seat. The earliest contemporary account we have of a coronation here at Scone is that of Alexander III, who was only 8 years old when he was crowned here on the 8th of July 1249. Such was the influence of the Church of Rome in the 13th century that most European crowning ceremonies required the presence of representatives of the Church, and most kings were thought to have been divinely appointed by God. But the kings of Alba were not divinely appointed by God, they were elected by their peers, and the king ruled with the consent of his nobility. Now, thankfully for Charles, nobody gets a vote on who king is nowadays, because, if they did, I doubt anyone would vote for him. I doubt anyone's going to vote for a guy who thinks that Camilla is hotter than Diana. By the time of Alexander's coronation in 1249, primogeniture was the accepted law in Scotland. However, the Scots kingdom still held on to this idea that the Scottish king was not divinely appointed and that he ruled through the consent of the nobility. But Alexander's coronation wasn't even a coronation because the Scottish kingdom had yet to be granted the rights of anointment by the Pope. The anointing part of Charles's coronation is that bit when he goes into the booth and he gets a kind of private, oily, holy dance off of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Without rights of anointment, Scotland was technically not a legitimate European kingdom and as such was subject to claims of overlordship from the English. And, spoiler alert, we're still not allowed to have our own oil. And so Alexander's coronation was an attempt to try and gain these rights of anointment from the Pope. It included modern ecclesiastical innovations, but also ancient Celtic rituals such as the reading of the king's lineage in Gaelic and his crowning upon the Stone of Destiny. The whole point was to say to the Pope, look, we are the modern Christian country, but we're also steeped in antiquity. Now, the Catholic Church, they loved the whole 8-year-old boy part of the ceremony, but the rest they remained pretty unmoved by. And Scotland wouldn't gain its rights of anointment until after its wars of independence against the English. Bran and I had an absolutely cracking day out at Scone. It's got gorgeous gardens. It is, of course, home to the famous Moot Hill where the ancient kings of Alba were crowned and where the bonny prince was delighted with his upgrade to king.